In week 2, you're designing a custom gem. And in the other video, I talk about the difference between gems and agentic AI. And that concept fundamentally goes to this idea of AI governance itself. Now, in this video, I've titled it AI Governance in Clinical Practice, but AI governance is much beyond that. It's not just in clinical practice, it's basically the use of AI in any context. And in this video, I'm going to talk through the difference between human in, human on, and human out of the loop. Yes, we are talking about all three contexts nowadays when we're talking about AI. So, how are we using AI and who has responsibility of the decisions that we make with AI? And so, we're talking about three safety architectures. And for me, it's a little more than just the safety architecture, it's also um, an aspect of how you want to interact with AI and how you conceptualize AI itself, because it'll relate to your philosophical bent, and we'll talk about that towards the end of this video. So let's start with human in the loop, right? Now, when you're talking about human in the loop, that is currently the gold standard, especially for clinical safety, right? In this instance, what it basically means is that the algorithm, the AI, it produces some recommendation, but the recommendation itself remains inactive until a human professional approves that recommendation. So the control is with the human and therefore the human in the loop. Now, this is a safeguard, right? And it's a mandatory safeguard for high risk irreversible decisions. So if it is a patient diagnosis that you're giving to the patient, that is high risk, that is irreversible, and therefore we want the human in the loop in that instance, right? um, Another example would be, say, tumor detection on a radiology scan, or chemotherapy dosing, or diagnostic suggestions. All of these are high risk, and therefore you need a human in the loop. The ultimate liability, then, right? Who's responsible for this? And the medical authority rests with the clinician. The AI acts as a clinical decision support tool. Now, this idea of liability and who it rests with, in many countries around the world, they have written up laws about this that clearly state that any medical interventions are all, the responsibility is all borne by the clinician and not the algorithms that have been used. Kind of like what we're talking about with publications and all. As the author, you take full responsibility. As the clinician, you take full responsibility. And so the human has to be in the loop in those instances. But what about when we have a lot of data, right? And we need to process things. The problem with the human in the loop is, while it is extremely um, good at mitigating risk, it is also a bottleneck because it depends on the human and it slows down the process. So speeding up the process will be human on the loop. So when you're talking of human on the loop, the human is more in the role of a supervisor. You're not approving every activity, you're just watching over things and intervening when necessary, right? So if you're thinking about an ICU monitoring dashboard, now the AI is continuously scanning everything. You don't need to approve every single activity, but if there is an alarm for something that falls outside the approved range of data, the clinician then is there to step in and monitor that, right? And so you're now looking at the human available, but not 100% all the time. And this then speeds up the process. Now, final thing where the fastest one is, of course, where the human is completely out of the loop. The human has no role to play whatsoever over here. So the whole activity is completely automated and the algorithm runs everything. So when we're talking about agentic AI, that's where we move into human out of the loop concepts, where agentic AI controls everything, right? And excuse me. So in healthcare, this can have a lot of negative consequences, but we have to be aware of where we are using it and where it does have potential to help as well, right? So if you're talking about automated reminders, scheduling changes, um, routing, routing files, doing insurance calculations and things like that, you definitely don't need to be spending time on things like that, and those are low risk, and definitely a human does not need to be in the loop for all of that. So that's a human out of the loop activity. So what happens over here is you're optimizing efficiency, but you need to make sure that it is in low risk domains, so you're minimizing risk and optimizing efficiency. So if you bring all of these things together, you have something that looks like this, right? So when you're in the loop, the human, the clinician, is the active validator and the approver. Your risk profile, you do it for high risk activities. And for example, any treatment plans and diagnoses. If you're on the loop, you're a supervisor or an auditor, the risk is moderate. And so it's things like ICU telemetry prioritization, etc. Now, if you want to step out of clinical examples and look at something beyond that, think about temperature monitoring AI systems, right? So there are, if we even think about the thermostats in our houses, right? When the temperature goes above a particular level, it'll turn the system on or turn the system off. So that's completely automated. Human is out of the loop, right? Now you might have certain other systems where if the temperature goes beyond certain bounds, the system doesn't do anything, it just beeps, and the human has to now intervene to carry out some activity. So that's just a general example as well. Now, if you're talking of out of the loop, the human is a system designer. It is for only low risk activities like appointment notifications, right? So when you're thinking about it and you want to decide where you want to go and how do we decide where the human is in these activities, you want to think about boundaries, right? So risk stratification. So you map out the risk that is involved in every single workflow, and then based on that is how you're going to decide where the human factors in. We have to look at deterministic parameters, meaning where the AI surrenders autonomy. So the AI has no autonomy, the human takes over, right? So if a specific situation happens, and this is like when the human is on the loop, any particular value that falls out of the accepted parameters will automatically trigger human intervention, right? And that becomes your human in the loop. Systemic auditing is when you have an independent audit log that is just to look at at regular intervals to see if the system is proceeding as expected, because the human is out of the loop in these particular environments. So this is a statement that IBM came out with, and it basically highlights the bias that can come when clinicians start clicking approve. There is this bias with clinicians when you get so many clinical decision support systems that send you nudges. One way of handling it is to just click approve for every nudge that the system provides, right? Because you just kind of trust it implicitly and you think it can never go wrong. The other extreme is, of course, you never take any of its suggestions at all. And these are two proven responses that clinicians have. Both of them are not effective, but we do have to be careful with this approve bias. This approve bias is very similar to your epistemic augmentation, where you just take what the system gives you as is, right? But where we need to be is training programs now have to emphasize that clinical AI or just any AI system is something that needs to be questioned, and it is not something that should be followed blindly. And that's something that we need to actively think about and actively um, reinforce in our learners and others that we work with, that AI is fallible, AI will make mistakes, AI has a lot of issues associated with it, and we as the human have to question what is being provided to us. So that's a very quick overview of human in the loop, on the loop, and out of the loop. Now, I mentioned that this goes to your philosophical standing as well, right? It's especially true if you start doing research with AI and AI systems, things like feedback, right? This is a very common one. If you're talking about giving feedback to learners, and this has come up a lot in the medical field, way more than in other educational realms. So, there is this tendency to want to automate a lot of the feedback because there's a lot of feedback you have to deal with, right? Um, but when you're automating it, where do you stand with it, right? Are you a person who believes that the human has to be in that loop to review the feedback so that it is the human who is giving AI enhanced feedback? Or are you a person who feels that I have tested this AI system thoroughly and it is very robust, and so we can just let it go by itself and we can have a human out of the loop feedback system? Right? That goes to what you believe about AI and what you believe about interactions with other people. And so these three things, while they all are also safety um, safety positions, they are also philosophical stances that we take when in our interactions with AI. And that's something that you need to think about. Now, remember, all of these are fluid and flexible. You don't have to assume the same position for every situation. Like we just looked in the examples, if it's automated reminders, it definitely does not need a human in that loop, right? So things are fluid and they change situationally, contextually. But even within that, where do you stand? And how are you viewing AI and how are you interacting with it? Again, another factor we have to consider is that AI is changing so much and improving so much. So where we are today will not be where we are tomorrow. Given all that, at this point in time, you need to think about, where am I? Who am I in relation to AI? How do I want other people to see me in my interactions with AI? Are all questions that we need to think about because this now decides our identity and what we portray to the world.